so we can come back to this session in case you need to hop off early or in case you were not able to join us live and you're watching your recording. Welcome. This is our second community skills event, a series focused on all the skills we need as community builders, managers, directors, heads of communities, executives. There's so much that goes into building a community. So I'm really excited that we're able to bring in speakers that are experts in different skills and have different experiences that they can share with us because there is just so many hats that we have to wear. So we're embracing it here today, and we're learning more and we're expanding our horizons. I'm Clara. I'm the founder at Talkbase, and I'm also the person behind our Talkbase Friends community. If you're not a member yet, I'll make sure to send you an invitation after this session. And yeah, I'm really excited today to invite Natalie to join me here on our little virtual stage. Natalie is the founder of Gen ZT, and she's also the group chat queen, which is another business she runs. So Natalie, welcome. I would love to give you the stage so you can also tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm currently Natalie Neptune, 24-year-old Gen Zer. And pretty much, yeah, I'm a top LinkedIn voice for Next Gen. And as you introduced me as like a founder of the Group Chat Queen, which I like to say is my overarching personal brand. And Gen ZT is a personal branding program for Gen Z founders, creators, investors. So that's overall what I do. So content creator and like community builder.
Amazing. We're so excited to have you, and I could not be more thrilled to have you walk us through today's topic. Today, we're going to talk about how to build a community brand, right? How to build a brand around the community you have. And I think this is such an underrated skill and an underrated thing we generally do as community managers. We focus so much inward on the members and on what's happening, making sure that the experience is good, that a lot of the times we forget to market ourselves, right? And like tell others. So I'm excited to jump in with you today to learn more. So let's get started. I would love to ask you kind of, just quick like foundation questions. When you're building a community, how important is it actually to like understand the target audience when you're thinking about your community brand? How important is that overall when you're getting started?
Yeah, I think it's really big to really know your key target audience. And actually, I like to share kind of a visual. I'll be going in and out of like kind of visuals too while I'm talking. Is kind of taking like kind of like you're controlling like a hotel. Are you building like a hotel or you're building more of like a motel or even hostel type of thing? And the big thing is
Mhm.
making sure that your community members are always, engaged and pretty much focused on what you're building. And I like to say every industry is different. I know me, I'm more in the startup and VC space. So I know my target audience is investors and founders and stuff. So the content and the resources that I bring to the table, whether it's in-person IRL, bringing those set of panelists together, or it's URL community. So in that WhatsApp group or whatever, making sure the resources that I pour is focused on them. So if I'm more on the private markets and the startup space, I'm not going to be posting job posts pretty much saying, oh, these are new job posts for entry-level jobs if my audience is more, Gen X or millennials. So it was really important to keep in mind, like pretty much who's your target audience. And as a result, the content that and resources that you give is really based on that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, and I love the analogy that you shared. Like, think about the audience and like what they're consuming. Like, are you building a hotel or a hostel or a motel? Right? What does that look like, and how would you like speak their language, right? And do you think that it's then important to that your brand speaks the exact same language as your audience, right? Like, how do you kind of how critical is sort of that like consistent brand voice? Like, how do you start developing it? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I like to say a big thing is like a role model. So for me, my role model is Megan Lois. She coined the term Gen Z VC. VC is like venture capital. And my brand voice is a lot kind of like hers, but of course a lot different. as the group chat queen. Kind of, I like to use the group chat queen as like my colors that I use is usually like pinks and baby blues and stuff in my color. So it shows that kind of youthful energy, kind of the Gen Z kind of vibes is kind of how I present my brand. And as you can see, I'm big on just not the URL, like, okay, of course, choosing the colors and branding colors, but also like in person. Like you can see, like now I have these yellow glasses that people pretty much know me to wear. And then I like to wear like bright clothes a lot. So like this is a top I have from Zara, that is
Mm-hmm.
kind of bright in colors. So I think it's good to connect those URL brand voice also with your in-person IRL because it helps maintain that level of trust. Why people would want to join your community, why people would want to give you sponsorship, why people would want to pay for your events or even membership for your community.
I mean, it's so obvious, but I mean, if you already have a brand voice, it should be everywhere, right? Like it should be in your logo, it should be the way you write copy, but it should be in the colors, right? It should be on the website, it should be felt in the community. I loved all the examples that you shared because I think that is so important. And I feel like oftentimes, again, if you are a solo community builder or you don't have that big of a team, I think a lot of community teams are often, understaffed. You just tend to be so focused on the day to day to like look at these like fun things that can actually bring a lot of value, right? Because if you build a strong brand, it's not just for fun, right? It can really have a huge impact and value on what you're building. I absolutely love that. What would be some of the, if we think about kind of communities, what would be some of the like right platforms that we can, launch our community on? Should we focus on, and again, should it be like kind of in synergy with our brand? Should it be in synergy with our audience? How can we kind of choose the right platform for our community, and where does kind of brand come in play with that?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to share my screen a little bit just to go into the visual part, just because I know I'm a big on the visual. There are so many different types of communities. And there is like Nas.io. I know a lot of people in the US don't really know this exists, but it's a free community platform where it connects to like your WhatsApp, your Telegram, to your Slack channel, and it's a free model, I like to say, versus like Mighty Network and Circle, which you guys I know probably are well aware of. They usually use a paid model where you actually have to pay for them. Then if you're more focused on, like creating a cohort of people where you're sharing information like the e-learning space, there's platforms like Maven, which is kind of at the bottom right-hand corner, kind of having those three like columns. So that's usually the symbol for their company. And I like to say all these different companies, they have their own mission statement. Like you have your own why statement. Companies have their own mission statement. So big thing is actually looking and doing the research and meeting with even people from these companies, seeing if there's a true alignment. Like for me, all my
Mhm.
communities are based in Nas.io because they kind of focus on building global communities and they focus on traveling all around the world because Nas is the founder of the platform. He was a world traveler and was a big storyteller. So as a result, I really resonated with his mission statement and in building global community. So I use this platform. But if you're more into college students, like in this upper right-hand corner, it's more like GroupMe is really popular with college students if you're focused on them, particularly in the US. So, and then in the middle, WeChat is like if you're building a community for people that are just based in China, since with WhatsApp, you can't really add Chinese phone numbers to that. So it's really being cognizant of who your community members are and even getting that upfront knowledge when they are joining your community, when you're doing that initial surveying, really asking them what country they're from, like where they mainly based, so you can make sure to build a community around their values.
I love that, and I love that you mentioned that the mission statement of the community platform that you decided to use kind of resonated with you, and that's their brand, right? Like that's what they put out there, and you can kind of think of the member journey then joining your community. They're gonna do the exact same thing, right? They're gonna look at your website. They're gonna look at the where's the community hosted? Does this speak my language, right? Which makes total sense. So I absolutely love that. Let's look into kind of what are the different types of content that you can create, not just like with your community, but also, that can be part of the brand and how you can then kind of use that content, for example. So if we start with just like the basics, what goes into, I think that content is really like the heart of community engagement. How would you say that, how can we like approach creating content that provides value for our members?
Yeah, so going back into building that brand voice, I think a big thing as the underrated tip is having coffee chats with people in your target audience. So having those one-on-one conversations and evaluating number one, like what questions are your community members mainly asking from you? Two is like, why do people even want to chat with you? Like, why did they even join the community? So once you have a lot of coffee chats individually with your community members or potential community members, since I know some of you guys may be potentially starting from scratch a community, is kind of evaluating what are people constantly asking me and what are questions I'm getting asked a lot, and be able to create content that really answers those questions. And I like to say you can have coffee chats like in person or like virtual. And a great other tip is also the people that you are meeting. A great way is to actually take a picture with that said person and post that like on social media. I can give you like kind of example, like what I kind of like when I share my screen is recently I just met with Grace Lynn. She's the founder of Design Buddies. She travels the world, has a huge community, a couple thousand. We did a selfie, and what she did, as you can see, is her phone. She actually recorded the screen, and she used that content. She posted in her Instagram stories. She put it on her LinkedIn. So a big thing, as I know you guys are super busy, is how can I integrate community and creating content into my way of life? So it's super easy. Since you may have kids, family members, it's something really easy to do, and be able to, of course, tag that person. Like, oh, if it's an IRL, be able to take a picture, tag them. And a big thing is when they reshare, you also get access to their community. And that's big on if you're meeting with people with similar values, your ideal customer. Obviously, if they reshare, repurpose that content, you get their community members to possibly join your community or your potential community waitlist.
Absolutely. I think I agree with you. And I think it's both about, right, like building your personal brand as kind of the community builder, but also building the brand of the community, right? And those two can be very interconnected. And it really depends on whether you're building kind of a consumer community, right? Or a hobby community that looks very different versus if you're building a B2B community where maybe the page itself would be sharing that, right? But there's all about these little ideas and how you can like leverage these moments again that tell you a little bit more about the values, right, of the community and why they're building what they're building. Speaking of social media, I think that brand building for communities on social media is essential and is a game changer in the way how you can grow your community. What are, how can we leverage social media to help us grow our community, both in that kind of, I think, in like both segments, right? Both kind of those like hobby and business communities. And yeah, do you have like any examples of how you've done that in the past? Yeah, would love to hear more.
Yeah, so I know this recently I started a series like on LinkedIn and Instagram, because the cool thing is like now LinkedIn prioritizes videos. So I definitely think it's about definitely good for you guys to start posting videos kind of on LinkedIn. And the cool thing is that you can repurpose it. And I started with a day in a event in our life. So if you're if you have an IRL community, in the hobbies or the event space, like you're doing a virtual or in person, craft or something like pottery, like actually filming yourself walking to the location or taking a drive to that location, kind of doing the intro, oh, I'm opening the door to the pottery class or whatever, and kind of filming, like what we're kind of doing, the community members. And of course, community members that want to participate can feel free to. I think a big thing is letting them know, hey, I'll be filming. I can cut you guys like out if you don't want to be filmed and stuff like that. That was like another one series that I kind of did that actually did pretty well. Because the cool thing is you can include your community, but also the community events that you're attending. So other communities in this similar niche or different niche, because as I said, like their audience could be really interested in the community you have. Two, is also in terms of if you're looking more at X as the platform, they have a more focus on like, text and images. There isn't focus really on the video side. So, and the only caveat with X is sometimes when you stop posting on X, you have to start all over again. But a lot of people do more those short bite-sized content, one sentences, two sentences, and it doesn't have to be super thought-provoking, but some are threads where it's more deep content. So it really depends on the platform that you're using. Instagram and TikTok are very big on trends. You kind of using trends, and if it fits your audience, kind of really making sure that trend, like the demure and all that stuff, like kind of people were blowing that up, but may not fit their company values like as much. So it really, really like depends like on what type of community you're creating.
Absolutely. How important do you think that just I'm thinking just top of my head when when you post on social media, as the company or kind of as the community builder, how important is it that things are always like on brand? I think this is like a big discussion in our industry. Sometimes you have a very spontaneous idea, but maybe you need like a designer to help you, right? Or
Yeah.
you need like an approval versus like you just want to put it out there and like get the reach. What do you think is the right way to go about it, right? If you have something you really want to share about your community, about the programs you're doing, the events you're doing, should we always focus on brand, or is it like more important just to get things out there?
Yeah, so I think it definitely, if you're working for a company, it should go through like the approval process. Because I think a big thing is like building relationships inside of your business is the business or company that you're a part of is super important. So figuring out caveats, and I think also it's important to also meet with the members of the design team individually, one-on-one, maybe take them out to coffee so they get a more gist of what you're trying to do. Because as someone, I worked in fintech, digital health, ad tech, consumer social and AI, and I went from the academia world to the more venture capital and startup world. A lot of times people don't really get your intention behind certain things because they had a maybe all academia background. So when you're super creative with certain things, they don't like really get it. So a lot of, I think it's important having those one-on-ones with people at the team. So then as when you go through that like approval process in the company, it can go through much more quicker because they may have a better understanding of what you're trying to do.
I think that's great advice. And if we look at kind of social media, there's so many channels that we can be present at, right? There are, like you mentioned, X with short form content, LinkedIn, there's all different versions of content there. If our audience is on other social platforms, Instagram, TikTok, but even YouTube, I know you also have a YouTube channel that started growing, which is super exciting. Do you think that as a brand, we should be like present in all the channels, or are there any like downfalls to that? Kind of what's your opinion there?
Yeah, so in terms of that, usually on a personal setting, at least, usually it's recommended to focus on actually on one platform and get that to like 10,000 followers or something like that. So really picking where your audience is. Like I know if it's more business professional, maybe X or LinkedIn. If it's more on the hobby side, maybe Instagram or TikTok would be better and just really honing on, okay, that Instagram ground, focusing on growing that. Because the big thing I like to say is like, you may have a small team. It may be just you doing the community and the social media things. So a big thing is sometimes focusing on one platform and really understanding that audience and growing that. Then over time, you can start to really focus on the other ones. But I think it's helpful to have account on other platforms, but really honing in on one and getting that really well done and then be able to focus like on other platforms. But I like to say, like,
Mhm.
not just using social media because you don't really own your audience with social media. Because I just recently had a friend, he had this huge entertainment industry, that had like 100, like 36,000 followers on Instagram, but Instagram just recently banned the account. And as a result, his whole like audience went away. So he's now building a newsletter. So I think it's important to build those multiple multi-channel platforms where you have people leading to your newsletter, maybe to your circle community or to these different lead magnets to different places. So like where you have control over that data.
Absolutely. I was actually going to ask you a follow-up question on that. So I'm glad you went there because I think, the purpose of the brand is generally to speak about your mission, to show your values, and if it's a good match, to get people in, right? And then you need to figure out a good way how to build that relationship and, like you said, get control of that data. If you don't have that loop present, you're going to end up losing a huge part of your audience, right? If they don't have a way to subscribe or become a member somewhere, etc. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. We talked a lot about like brands living in the virtual world, right? Like how can we think about our audience, about our social media? But I think there is so much more that goes into brand building IRL, right? Like in person. I think one of the first big things is events. I think that events can be like a major part of community building and like getting your brand out there and like interacting with your members face to face. What would you say are kind of the key like differences in organizing really successful in-person events and like really good, virtual events as well?
Yeah, so I like to say the barrier is higher usually for IRL events. There's less amount of people that are willing to create in-person events, and there's a high demand but low supply in a lot of cases. So usually you don't have to do much to put on a good event. Sometimes you pick a coffee shop, let's do co-working for an hour at this coffee shop and you kind of pick off a spot for a couple of people and you put up a Luma link and have people sign up. And also in terms of URL, I definitely think because it's it's a lower barrier because all you have to do is kind of worry about your computer and stuff like that. You have to kind of put a little bit more effort into getting more traction for those URL events because as you know, with the post-COVID world, a lot of people are craving those in-person connections. And due to the increase of AI, that will be only continuing, as even Sam Altman
Mm.
talked about how due to the increase of AI, there'll be increased money being put into IRL events, as is used as a key marketing tool for a lot of companies now. So I know I'm personally putting my bets into IRL and I'm shifting my membership models to focus on IRL just because that's what my community members have been saying, and that's what has been able to pretty much fits the audience needs and be able to grow a lot faster than focus on URL. I say URL focus is more like 20 like pre-pandemic. You could easily grow a community. There's so many examples. I like to say even Megan Loy's community, Gen Z VCs, she had a channel, with 60,000 Slack members and it was super active and she was able to really grow with that. Even Design Buddies was able to grow really fast having just a Slack was enough or like a group chat. But now we're post-pandemic and its events are the in IRL events is what is really helping people to increase that retention rates and
Mm.
get more members to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that one place where you can also like potentially like really get to know the people behind the community, right? Like they get to meet you, they get to meet the community builders, they get to really like interact with the community in a real life, which I think is a really like precious experience. So I think I also enjoy like in-person events a lot more if they're with a community that I'm very passionate about, that are mostly focused on like building those connections, right? Maybe they're not necessarily just educational. There can be so many other different use cases on why to do that. Um, I would also like to ask you around, other ways how to kind of build more of those relationships. We talked about events and kind of meeting people in person. What is your view on ambassador programs, right? Of communities? Because I think that ambassadors can really help you like grow and like grow your community brand. Like they can really become your brand ambassadors. How would you go about selecting the right ambassadors? What benefits can you get from these programs?
Yeah, I like to say like number one is that you can get a lot of user generated content created for your product. So whether that product is, like a membership kind of group chat model, or whether it's like, a physical product, that's a great way is to be able to get content created for your brand that increases more visibility. Because the big game, I like to say why a lot of products, companies, and businesses fail, it's just because of lack of distribution and lack of media distribution. You don't have to build the best product, but you have to have the best marketing and the best community in terms of that. So it's really through that you can also number two is build a community and like get feedback on that product that you're building. And the fact that they have that statement ambassador, it kind of gives that exclusivity. Because I think a big thing is selling that exclusivity thing, making people feel like exclusive when they're a part of this certain community and stuff like that. Because people like to feel valued, and not everyone can get what they have is like usually a big thing with a lot of communities. And two is like I think it's biggest selecting ambassadors that are already using a product. I do see a lot of issues like even with affiliates and stuff, people use people that don't use the product, or maybe they used it before and they don't use it now anymore. Like they usually get people like that. So then they're not as invested in the product or community or that platform that you're kind of building. So you won't get as much retention, engagement from them. And I think it's also important to see what they're posting on social media. So that ambassador, making sure it aligns with your mission and value statement. Because I like to say they're like a piece of you, a piece of your company. So when they're going out saying, I'm an ambassador of da 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 like thing, like they're a part of like your brand. So you want to make sure they reflect your missions and values.
Absolutely, right? They should almost be onboarded as like a part-time employee, right? Like they should have all the resources, they should understand the mission, they should understand your brand voice, right? They should understand the value so that they can really represent what you're building. Very cool. I wanted to do a quick time check and also remind our attendees that if you have any questions for Natalie, feel free to pop them in the chat. I actually have a few questions from attendees that they submitted while registering for our event that I actually wanted to quickly have a look at, which I think are very relevant to what we were talking about now and kind of the different strategies for how to build your brand and like which channels to use, etc. One question that we have here from Anna is each community is specific. How can I like build and develop a branding strategy that works well for my community, right? Like where do I get started? How do I know if I go online in real life, if everything is, in pastel colors or if everything's just, in orange colors? Like how can folks make these big branding decisions?
Yeah, so like I mean, going into the design part, I'll talk about how I built Gen ZT, which I
Mm-hmm.
actually recently just got stopped on the streets because someone remembered Gen Z T. They're like, oh, you're the founder of Gen Z T. I'm like, yeah, while I was getting my eyebrows done, I'm like, yep, that's what I do. So I think really having a clear brand voice, design and colors are important, and even like font size that really stands out. Like going for me, like Gen Z T, I knew my target audience was Gen Z. And I knew I was focusing on personal branding because it's a personal branding program. So for me, I knew I wanted more a clean image. So not a lot of like text and stuff like that. So I wanted to overall look clean because they're building their own brand on top of this. Like, so I don't want it to be very busy, but have that clean approach, but be very vibrant. So I use more like of a yellow color and a brown color just because I felt like it really resonated with my audience with Gen Z tea. The spilled tea is kind of like the brown color. So I go like into the basis of what I kind of like typically. I love coffee and not coffee, I love tea. So that's why I use like the tea kind of thing. And I'm Gen Z. So that goes in more of the designing colors. And I think a big thing is experimenting with things on Canva. They have a lot of cool designs that are pre-made and you can like play around with them. The colors and fonts is something that really feels right. I don't have a branding degree, but I think a big thing is having something eye-catching that people want to stop and at least see what you're doing. And I think that's what I really created for Gen Z T in the group chat queen, which I got top LinkedIn voice for next gen just because of the brand that I created for myself. And two, going into like the IRL or the IRL in person, I think a balancing of both having online and in-person events. Sometimes it helps first to start online and then transitioning to in-person, but some people just start with in-person events and just see who arrives, maybe two people, three, but as you host more.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I was just saying that yes, when you usually get started with the in-person events, it can be one or two people, but then it starts growing, right? Amazing. Cool. Feel free to continue.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think, more the question she had was aligned to talking about
Mm,
the branding and then also whether managing doing in-person or IRL events. I know with Gen Z, I focused on building a global community. Yeah, going is like consistency is definitely the key, like with anything that you're doing. Um, like willing to, okay, if you had a cohort for 7 weeks, making sure you're showing up every single week with what you said that you were going to do, with that. And I think it's a bit clear communication because, like, what if something comes up,
mm,
like your kid gets sick or something, they have an ear infection, and you're like, oh my gosh, I was going to host this event. Sometimes that's when it's helpful to have a team. I know a lot of people aren't willing to have a team, but that's when it's helpful when you can delegate certain things to other people to be able to take over since everything can't be recorded. Some things will, like due to confidentiality, depending on what kind of community I like to say you're building. It's helpful to have like other people that are willing to pitch in when like something happens.
absolutely. It's yeah, life can happen, right? So I think like being able to, like you mentioned, and Andre in chat as well, consistency is key. And also I think a big part of that is being human, right? I think that's the one like big value in communities is that they're built by humans for humans. So it's okay if things don't always work out, but I think being like transparent and communicative is really, really important. And I love the tips you gave, kind of thinking about, what this brand could look like, what would I want it to look like, what's valuable for me, what's valuable for my company, for the company I work for, and then going from kind of that creative part all the way to the strategic part, right? Thinking like, as you mentioned, from choosing, this is what my audience, this is what we're doing, this is what my audience is looking for, we don't want to overshadow them, so this is the branding we're going with, and also these are like the places we're going to meet them, these are the online and the IRL places. I love that. I love that framework because I think that it can be quite challenging, especially if you're not creative, or again, if you're just like, if you're in the zone every day, just like chatting with your community. So I love that. And I think this is such a good reminder for everyone that communities should be fun, right? Like that's they should be attractive, right? There should be, like you said, something that captures you. So I loved all of those tips. Another question we got one more I wanted to read out. It was from Siboni, and the question I thought was a really good one. How do you differentiate your brand and your company brand from your personal branding? Any tips you would have?
Yeah, that's actually great. Oh my gosh, I have so many examples because I'm big on building case studies. So companies I really like, and I recommend everyone. I'm sure you guys are already doing having studies, case studies of companies that you're really like, inspired by. So like for me, my brand is the group chat queen. So for me, I'm kind of in the startup space and VC space. So I like to say it's definitely different than like maybe like some banking institutions or companies that are a little bit more strict about how you post on social media. So for me, the group chat queen is the group chat queen. It stays there, and I keep my LinkedIn with that branding, even if I work for another company. So it's big for me. It's does the company align with my values and goals? Like I know like Google, you see most of their employees, they own their own startup, they have their own community. So I'm like, oh, even like LinkedIn, they have their own like literally, one lady, she has like her own company on the side. She has a newsletter. She has speaking engagement. She has consulting gigs. She does all that, but she works for LinkedIn and she's able to post whatever she wants on her platforms. And she has a visa here too in the US. So it's like really finding that company that aligns with your values. Like I know I worked for a startup. They gave an example of like this, like their branding colors that we could use for our LinkedIn banner. And I was trying to edit it with my branding, but it just wasn't working. And I'm like, okay, LinkedIn literally gave me the top LinkedIn badge for a reason. It was because of the group chat queen, and they really loved the branding and the mission. So I'm keeping that there. And like because that's also I like to say like my brand is what gets the company more value. So the fact that they trust the group chat queen is the reason why you get, more views to your company page, more likes, more engagement, possible sponsorship. Since my brand is focused on founders, investors, possibly even investors that may be interested in that said company. So that's more like the private market, but I like to give the public market example. There's a lot of people in the public market that have their own brand and they still work for our company, but they have their own branding colors and stuff like that.
I love that example. So thank you for answering our submitted questions. And we got a comment that Marianne loves what you do. So I just wanted to highlight that from the chat. I want to leave some space for our audience questions, but I know we had a few more topics we wanted to cover. I think what's really top of mind for me right now is if you build a brand and you invest, some time and resources into doing so, how do you track the success, right? What would maybe be some of the key metrics that you would engage us to look at? Because I think it's very emotional, right? So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so I like to say it really depends on the company that you're working for. As like I more have been in the private sector, so a lot of it was for me building from 0 to 1. So for me, like with my own business, Gen ZT is kind of as I'm kind of turning it into like a membership model. Well, bye-bye. Membership model, like is kind of are people willing to pay? I think that's the easiest way to see if you reach product market fit is like, okay, are people willing to pay for like what you're doing? That's more like if you're on like the business side, but I think if you're on more the corporate side, is it tracking like, attendance rates, event engagement. So people willing to participate in those like post-event feedback scores, those little surveys that your company wants like people to fill out on what how they like the event and what they would like to see in the future and stuff. And also seeing the return, like actually meeting with people one-on-one. And if they were able to get what they wanted out of them, whether that was like, they wanted to get a mentor. So tracking that kind of stuff. Like, oh my gosh, from this event, I was able to get like a mentor, or I was able to get like another client or something, signed off from this event that I attended. Or for investor, it's like, oh, I was able to get an investor that was able to invest this amount of money in me. So I think a lot of it, it's like, it's kind of like hard. I think it depends. Like those, I think that's a big thing in the community space even is like how to track those engagement metrics because it's so hard and it's really dependent on the company that you're working for or like your own business. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm happy that you mentioned kind of those like that you didn't go that you went a little bit beyond like how big of a reach and how many likes we got, but also like what are the like big things that can happen after, right? Like did it bring us a new hire? Did I get a new opportunity, right? Did I meet a new person? I love that you mentioned those things as well. Amazing. I wanted to give our a quick shout out to Natalie for spending these last minutes with us. And I wanted to check in if anyone has any other questions. I know we had a few audience questions already, but just wanted to make sure before we let Natalie go. And it looks like we're all good. I know we got to cover almost everything, but I always want to be mindful of time. We got a lot of positive feedback in the chat. So Natalie, again, thank you for diving deep into branding and communities today with us. Thank you for the amazing prep that you did and for all your answers as well. If you want to connect with Natalie, I am going to put her LinkedIn here in the chat. So you can also follow her story and also Gen ZT and Group Chat Queen as well. So you can kind of follow all the projects she does. And yeah, Natalie, thank you so much for being here. As the last thing today, I wanted to invite everyone to our next session. We are going to have our next session on how to build a community strategy from scratch. So I will be sending an invitation to all the attendees from today. Again, Natalie, thank you so much for being here and big thank you to our community as well. Hope everyone has a good day. Bye bye.